Hello everybody, my name is Albert Cook and I'm the lead compositor at VRPlayhouse. Today I'm going to show you Cara VR's C Stitcher, as well as some techniques using Nuke's compositing tools to correct and improve your stitches. Let's get started. Here I have my solved and stitched shot. Overall the stitch looks pretty good, but I'm seeing some issues here with the boy, the sign on the railing, and this mom and daughter. So what can we do to improve this stitch? Because we're stitching this shot with Cara VR inside Nuke, we have a lot of flexibility, as well as access to Nuke's awesome compositing tools. There's 3 ways we can refine our stitch. We can work before the C Stitcher, tweak the C Stitcher itself, or after the C Stitcher. Each area has its strengths, so let's explore each one. First, let's take a look at doing some cleanup before the C Stitcher. So directly under my C camera solver, I'll insert a split and join node. This will split my stitch back into the individual cameras, just like the footage I read in up here. So what kind of cleanup work is good to do before the stitch? Since we're working directly from the C camera solver, we are working in the default camera space. So simple paint and rotor work, or fixing ghosting such as foreground or background convergence issues, or an object featured in multiple cameras as not aligning, is going to be best done here. The goal with pre-stitch cleanup is to minimize, and then let C Stitcher do the heavy lifting. So in this shot, I'm seeing some ghosting down here on the sign. So let's look at the cameras which are causing the ghosting. Looks like camera 1 and 5. I'll do a quick roto here in camera 1. Use the keyboard shortcut letter O to bring up a roto node. I'll do a quick roto around the sign and feather out the edges with the keyboard shortcut letter E. Then I'll click on my RotoShapes color tab to change the alpha from white to black, since I want to exclude this shape from my mat. What I'm doing is removing the sign so that it only shows up in camera 5. And let's take a look at the result from our C Stitcher. The ghosting is gone, but we've created another problem. Now the railing doesn't quite line up. To quickly fix this, I'll add a grid warp node and warp the railing into alignment. I'll adjust my warp and change my background settings to on black. That's pretty close, but let's warp it a little more. Great. Let's move on to the C Stitcher itself. So what kind of work is good to do tweaking the C Stitcher settings? Global stitch refinements. Let's open up the C Stitcher and take a look at the Vectors tab. We have several parameters here we can change, so what's the best way to go about it? Generally, I start down here with iterations and warps. Warps controls how many times alignment is repeated internally. Increasing this will lengthen the distance vectors will go, helping to reconcile large parallax differences at bigger computation times. Iterations controls the precision of the alignment process itself. The more the better, but most times, after a certain threshold, there will be no visible differences. If that's not improving my result, I'll move on to strength and consistency. Strength is the balance between allowing hard edges or smoothness in your vectors. Consistency forces paired adjacent cameras to work together. This can increase accuracy if the parallax differences between cameras are small, which is almost never the case. It is a setting that rarely needs to be tweaked, but sometimes can make the difference for a particular shot, even by lowering it. And then finally, vector detail. Vector detail controls the image resolution at which vectors are computed. Increase to align finer features of the image at the cost of a bigger computation time. Every shot and every stitch is different, so dialing in the perfect settings for your stitch will require some experimentation. In this shot, it looks like lowering the iterations to 4 and increasing the vector detail to 1 help resolve some of the stitching issues. Before, after. Before, after. Lastly, there is post-C-Stitcher cleanup. Let's add another split and join node after our C-Stitcher. As you can see, now that we've stitched the cameras, we're working in lat-long space. So what kind of cleanup is good to do after the stitch? More complex or moving roto, tracking, warping of individual cameras, or elements within those cameras to perfect alignment not solved by the C-Stitcher. In this shot, we're getting some ghosting on the boy as he crosses over the bridge. Part of the reason this is happening is because the boy is showing up in multiple cameras, in this case, cameras 2, 4, and 5. And those different versions of the boy aren't warping together into one image. A simple way to remove the ghosting in this case is to rotor the boy from the camera that we don't need, in this case, camera 5. Leaving us only 2 versions of the boy that are being warped together and giving us much less ghosting. I'll do a quick roto here in camera 5 and remove them. I'll draw my rotor shape and feather it out. Don't forget those keyboard shortcuts, O for roto and the keyboard shortcut E to extend our feather edge. Since we're applying corrections after our C-Stitcher, we need to add a C-Blender node to reblend our stitch and see our result. Before and after. Before and after. Our roto helped resolve some of those ghosting issues we were having with the boy. Another area we are getting some ghosting is during this selfie with the mom and daughter. We are getting a lot of ghosting, particularly around the hand and cell phone. Just like we saw in the boy example, this ghosting is occurring because these people are both in camera 2 and camera 4, and those 2 different versions of them are not warping into one image. If we roto and remove them from camera 4, leaving them only in camera 2, and giving us much less ghosting. I'll do a quick roto here in camera 4 and remove them. When I rotor the mother and the daughter, I'll follow the line of this tree since it's a natural edge within the shot. Don't forget those keyboard shortcuts, O for roto and the keyboard shortcut E to extend our feather edge. I'll draw my rotor shape and feather it out. A quick way to do this is with the letter E. Before and after. Before and after. If we roto and remove them from camera 4, leaving them only in camera 2, we can see we've resolved this ghosting issue. For illustrative purposes, I'm going to turn off this grid warp in our pre-stitch cleanup and add a spline warp after my stitch, just to show you that the same work could easily be done after the stitch, if that works better for your particular shot. I'll draw a line along the rail and warp it into position. I'll draw a line along the railing, select, and right-click, and click Duplicate in A and Join. This will automatically create a duplicate line that I can move and warp the way I need. I can toggle between my cameras, from camera 1, the camera I am warping, to camera 5, the camera I'm trying to match, and use my camera 5 to help line up my spline warp. After I'm happy with my warp, I'll draw a quick garbage mask around my spline and check the pentagon in the spline warp properties. This will create a hard boundary that will isolate my warp so that I'm not affecting too much of the image. Conversely, I could check the double arrow box to create a softer, more feathered boundary. Different technique, same result. So there you have it. Stitching VR footage in Nuke with Cara VR gives you the flexibility to improve your stitch at multiple points in the process, as well as giving you access to Nuke's powerful compositing tools. This is Albert Cook from VRPlayhouse. See you later.